What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod. Another week of giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. And this week, Dave and I will be talking about some movies, a television show, and some albums. But Dave, I want to check in with you first. A report dropped shortly before recording that there might be a Master of None season 3 coming out. What do you make of this?
Highly skeptical because this reporting is from a UK-based website called Chortle and was only picked up by Collider, none of the more reputable Hollywood trade publications. So this is hardly been sourced. Honestly, it's really take it with a grain of salt kind of news. But from what those people are saying, uh, Aziz and Alan Yang were actually trying to get this shot on the down low back in spring 2020 when before plans changed, of course. So either way, if we were to get a Master None season 3, I feel like everyone who's a fan of the show would be very satisfied, no matter what it is, what format it is, just because it's been so long since season 2, and um, it's such a fun show and unique show, and uh, I haven't been holding on to hopes that we're going to get it anytime soon. So I actually would be kind of surprised if we did turn out to get it in the near future.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of TV shows starting to look at the effects of COVID, right? And John Wilson's How To on
Yeah.
HBO, probably the one that comes to mind as really capturing that moment so distinctly. And obviously, Master of None being a fictional show involves having scripts that are a little bit more written and fleshed out, but it'd be really interesting to see someone like Aziz tackle that transition, that shift from being a more a show about like experiencing the world, especially season uh, 2, venturing off to Italy and kind of
Mhm.
driving through the countryside, as you can see with Dave's background, him and his friend on the mopeds on the
Yes.
countryside. It's really cool, but to kind of see that become a little bit more uh, look like an introverted look at the the effect that COVID had could be a really interesting thing. Especially if shooting did actually start in spring and then had to be halted or shifted in some way. And Aziz seems like the kind of guy to do it, and especially because Aziz over the last couple of years has become a little bit more out of the spotlight after
Mm.
the sexual abuse allegations in 2018. He obviously did the stand-up special in 2019 that we reviewed. Check that out on youtube.com/nostalgiapod. But I think he might actually be a good person to tackle this and look at the pandemic and how it affected people in interesting ways. So that could be an interesting thing to come out of it. But I'm with you. I'm a little skeptical on if this is actually happening. I would love it to, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, along those lines, with Aziz having in real life be living in London of late, says that season 3 would be set in London, and also that Naomi Aki would be joining the cast. Again, don't know how these people know this, so I again, don't get your hopes up, but maybe in a few weeks we actually get something more substantial, or Netflix even announces something officially. But until we get that, I'm not gonna put too much stock into this. But it's the first real buzz of any variety, real or fake, that had any kind of legs to it, I'd say. So, and we know
Yeah.
that Netflix did not cancel the show, and they had stood by Aziz, and of course they released his special right now. So we know Netflix was happy to make season 3 once Aziz wanted to make it, and I believe he said he wanted to be at a different stage in his life to make that season. You could tell this was a show that was very personal to him.
Mhm.
And even the evolution between the first 2 seasons, you could tell that him, and I assume Alan as well, would want to continue that kind of feel. So I have to imagine Aziz feels in a different spot now, like many of us do after 2020. So I guess
Definitely.
it makes sense. But yeah, let's wait for more news first.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that. So hit that subscribe if you're watching on youtube.com/nostalgiapod or soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod. Why don't we jump into some music quick here, Dave? And we're going to start with a pro era rapper that I think we talked about one other time
Mhm.
with his prior album
Oh,
drop.
yep.
Looking for the name here.
Open Flame EP last
Thank you.
August.
Nyck Caution, straight out of Brooklyn. Um, yeah, I mean, where do you stand with Nyck Caution? Are you a fan?
Well, of course, man, of course. He had so many great moments on the Beast Coast album
Yeah,
from 2019. You know,
that was really where I was introduced to him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he had features, of course. You know, on like Joey songs and all that as a Pro Era member, but and you know the Nick and Knight stuff. But really, I feel like the Beast Coast album was where most people got reacquainted with him because he was quite young when he started um, as a rapper. So on that, you know, you remember the songs like Bones or like these really rapid fire flows, and he had kind of a unique delivery within the Pro Era crew and within Beast Coast, and I thought he definitely uh, made the most of his limited time on that Beast Coast album, no question. And on Open Flame last year, a brief EP, but still had some good highs, namely a song like Margot Robbie, which just was a classic, dusty ass boom bap song like a lot of old school Joey was. So always happy to hear more from Nick, and this is his debut album,
Hmm.
Anywhere But Here, at last.
Yeah, and did you feel like Anywhere But Here was one what you expected to hear from Nick, but then uh, was at the quality level that you were hoping to hear from him?
Yeah, I don't really know if it changed my perception of him at all, but I did like it quite a lot. I think there's some numerous highlights on this
Mhm.
album, and that would kind of just because, like Joey, he has grown past his boom bap traditionalist beginnings and obvious influences, and I think just has a more well-rounded sound and approach to making rap. And on some of the best songs, you hear that on Anywhere But Here. And there's, what like a lot of Pro Era projects, Beast Coast projects, there's choice guests along the way. So yeah, I think there's a number of highlights, but yeah, I mean, I feel like Nick just kind of goes to the beat of his own drum like a lot of these dudes. So he's not trying to chase any trends or hey, get any TikTok hits or anything. He's just making the music that speaks to him, and it's by design, not probably not for everyone, but I still liked it a lot.
Yeah, I thought this was a really solid album. I agree. I don't think this like changed my perception of like his ceiling or how I see him as a rapper moving forward. It's actually funny because I think like the first like half of the album is kind of reminded me of the Jack Harlow album, but with just better bars in a way. I think
Yeah,
especially just like
sure.
the sound being more of that like jazzy hip hop sound that's very popular right now. But then about like halfway through, it really starts to pick up for me, and I think especially once you start to get people like Denzel Curry jumping on the track, like the energy level just totally like skyrocketed. And I think the album is helped out a little bit by some of the features in the second half. So I found the second half, I think, to be a little bit more engaging than the first half, but although the first
Mhm.
half was still a solid listen. Um, I think that Denzel Curry track "Bad Day" was the one that jumped out to me. How'd you feel about that one?
Yeah, that's great. That's also, I think, it's a strong Denzel Curry feature. Didn't feel mailed in at all.
No.
When Denzel, on top of rapping, also gives you kind of that, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it reminds me of like Clout Cobain, his
Mm,
song, like that kind of delivery on that shit's great. And also unique because Denzel just kind of brings that whenever he's on the track. It's just there's just something special about him.
yeah.
Um, Product of My Environment really stood out to me because I think that's one of Nick's best performances as like a coming
Hmm.
of age storytelling type song. Again, competent ass bars about growing up in Brooklyn. And then you have really good guest spots from Code the Friend and Eric the
Yeah.
Architect of Flatbush Zombies. That one stood out to me a lot. Um, and then, I mean, you got a Joy feature on this, but I actually also quite liked What You Want with Gashi towards the beginning. And that actually probably had my favorite quotable from Nick. I put a ski mask up and leave you slumped. God. Uh, good stuff there. Um, yeah, what else stood out to you?
Yeah, well, you mentioned "Product of My Environment," which I agree was one of the stronger tracks. I also really like "Things Could Be Worse" with CJ Fly and Jake Luttrell.
Mm.
Something about that
Fla.
song just really like caught me. I think it is like CJ Fly just brought a lot of energy to that for me. Um, but yeah, I think overall I left this album being like Nyck Caution is going to be putting out a lot of very solid albums, and I could almost see him having, obviously not quite in like the same vein as Mac Miller, but someone who like is putting out a lot of really solid
Mm,
albums and maybe then takes a little bit of a leap as he gets just more seasoned and might start experimenting more or finding that more authentic sound to him. But
right.
definitely just overall really solid artist, I'd say.
Yeah. Early on December 24th, which I think is another good Nick performance, I thought it was notable that the hook is farmed out. It's not him. It's LB3 on that
Hmm.
on that in that instance. And I Nick hasn't like tried to, again, like I said before, he hasn't tried to like sing and like diversify and become all melodic or anything in that regard. But the rest of the sound has evolved. So the thing that Mac Miller comparison actually makes some sense, but I'm curious how far he would actually take that in terms of genre, because Mac really did evolve across genres. But actually, I think my favorite song would be the closer, "Kids That Wish,"
Mm,
where that's probably where you get like the most unique or new delivery from Nick on that, and also I think the message on that song is quite good. I like the line about chasing hits on TikTok and stuff. And overall, this album seems to be influenced a lot by the loss of Nick's father, who was a
yeah,
big part of his life. But I mean, even that's the thing about like a lot of the pro era guys, a lot of the East Coast guys. Like we talk about, so like underachievers. It's like they don't have to do anything else to just have like really long, uh, vivid careers as just New Yorkers that have good bars, and like there isn't, there'll always be an audience for this, you know.
totally. Yeah, it's impressive what I feel like that collective's doing, and I'm hoping that we continue to see like a couple of these guys keep rising up. Obviously, Joey's the big name, but CJ
Right.
Fly was great on this. We have Kirk Knight, who I think we've liked some of what we've seen from him. So,
Yeah.
um, definitely, I think they're an exciting group to keep following for sure. Any last thoughts before we move on?
I like the timing of this. Get it out now. There's nothing else to talk about. I have to imagine this would be one of his more listened to projects, just by the fact that he can grab more people's attention.
I was
It'll
going to
get
ask you,
it'll get posted by more sites and stuff.
is this the album of the year so far?
For me, yes.
Yeah, same
January
here.
18th. It's my favorite album of 2021. Definitely.
So you're telling me that you like it more than Zayn's "Nobody Is Listening"?
Yeah, I am not a Zayn guy.
No,
Cue the
really.
thumbs downs.
Well, I think the last time we talked about him was what, with Icarus Falls. Did we even review that? I
We
think.
didn't. It came out like December, bad time for us to get new music, but
Yeah,
that I think that's one of the most interesting things about this new Zayn album to me is the meta nature of it. Nobody is listening is the title, and that's a direct reference to Icarus Falls, which was a famous
huge flop.
commercial flop.
Yeah,
Probably one of the most notable commercial flops from a mainstream artist in some time. Again, Zayn is the first person to break off from One Direction before they went on hiatus as a group, and following up a very successful first solo album. Icarus Falls really fell flat. Icarus fell. He got too close to the sun. Again, very very meta name, and obviously that's not what Zayn intended. But now you have again something that's like really the antithesis of Icarus Falls. Nobody is listening. There was no promo for this at all. It was announced a week in advance. Um, the early singles haven't made a whole lot of noise. And Zayn, if you look at how Zayn operates, he is not active on social media all that much. We people just know he's with Gigi Hadid and they just had a child. And like I didn't actually realize this until I was doing some research, but Zayn has never gone on a solo tour.
hmm.
Kind of
Interesting.
wild to think about, because again, he had a lot of early success when he went solo.
Yeah,
And it just seems like he's very disinterested in a lot of the what it takes to be a mainstream pop star, and especially after what happened at Icarus Falls. So I found all that meta stuff kind of interesting, because you can tell Zayn's approach was different. But music wise, I don't know if there's too much different. So if you're a fan of Zayn, you probably still like Nobody Is Listening, but I don't know if this is going to grab people that weren't super into what he was already doing.
yeah. I'm just on his Spotify here, and Pillow Talk is 6 million spins short, but he pretty much has three songs that have 900 million spins or more. And he has one song with Taylor Swift, I Don't Want to Live Forever, probably the ZAYN song I like the most,
Same.
that has over 1 billion spins, which is just,
Yep.
the guy does numbers. But then it also has his most recent singles here, or the biggest ones off of
Right.
this album, and they have like 60 million, 14 million. Nothing to really scoff at. A lot of artists would die to have that sort of play.
Sure.
But that, comparatively, it's just something about this album is not sticking with people or hitting with people as much, it seems.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing about Icarus Falls. You look at that, one of those songs you mentioned is from that, Dust Till Dawn with Sia,
Mm.
945 million streams. And yet, again, Icarus Falls like completely flops on the charts and doesn't sell anything. That's including streaming. So it almost like seems, apparently that song had a extended life and a long tail after the initial flop. Either way, uh, here we are with Zayn just kind of throwing something out. And again, because he has never solo toured and there was no announced plans to tour in 2020 either. So is he just doing this to fulfill his label contract? Does he care at all? Because the nature of his music, which is really just what stripped down lo-fi R&B, he's by far the most R&B of any of the 1D
Mm.
dudes. That's obvious, but maybe it's just the nature of his delivery to me. But I don't know how invested he is in being music. It seems because again, like he hates the whole pop apparatus. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to this, I pretty much felt like this is the type of album I might throw on when I'm at work doing paperwork and I just kind of need something fun and inoffensive and just poppy, but not super engaging in the background. And that's kind of how I felt uh, Zayn's vocal performance kind of was throughout this. It felt a little bit like listless in a way, not necessarily bad, but just like the energy
Right.
and the enthusiasm just felt a little low throughout this. And I would say that there's a couple of songs that stood out. I think Vibes is a song
Yeah.
that I thought was pretty good. I actually kind of liked When Love's Around with Sid. I think just having like him
Mhm.
interplaying off somebody really helps. But I gotta be honest, I like the second half of this record around like Unfuckwittable, Windowsill. I pretty much started skipping halfway through the songs. I just couldn't do it. I just was
Yeah.
not finding these that pleasurable to listen to. Where were you at? Was there anything you liked in this?
Yeah, I think Vibes is probably the best all around song.
Mhm.
Sweat was kind of funny to me because that's where you get your '80s
Mhm.
influence, as we talk about with every major pop release these
I was gonna
days. In
say you
this
have to have
instance,
it.
it was the "In the Air Tonight"
Mhm.
drums, very reminiscent. That I appreciated that. Um, I also like seeing Devlin
Mhm.
feature on Windowsill, just because Devlin, not a mainstream rapper, but of course rapper from the UK, most famous for the cover of "All on the Watchtower" that we love from the Young Pope.
Yep.
So seeing Devlin pop up on a RCA Records album, I'm like, oh, that's unexpected. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not even like a pillow talk guy, so like I don't really have a big like frame of reference for what good Zayn is. But like I think Vibes is probably the most listened to. If anything, that kind of gave me like Chris Brown vibes,
Mhm.
honestly. But
Yeah,
normally
for sure.
his energy combined with the production, like it's by design very minimalist and lo-fi and like smooth, and like his falsetto fits in these really like soft ballads. But that's just not my cup of tea usually. So I'm definitely curious just to see how this album performs and what happens next for Zayn as a pop star, because he's been the most prolific of the 1D guys solo by nature of being the first to go solo. But I mean, it's kind of over in terms of mainstream battles because Harry has ran away
Wow.
with that. Not that they want to be compared, but early on, when it was like Sign of the Times Harry and Pillow Talk Zayn, it was more of a conversation. It's not a conversation anymore.
Yeah, Harry Styles has now dropped a top 500 album of all time, Dave. So, I mean, there's really no
Oh god.
competition until Zayn gets on that list. Um, yeah, I mean, I think if you like Zayn, you'll probably find more in this to like than we do. It's just if you're not a fan, I don't think you're gonna find too much that's gonna wow you on this record. So I'd say it's one you could skip, but definitely check out the Nyck Caution record and check out WandaVision, which is now on Disney Plus. The first two episodes dropped this past Friday. Obviously, this is Marvel's first step into the television world as Phase 4 is kind of starting to kick off a little bit. We were
Yeah,
supposed
sure.
to, yeah, we were supposed to have the Black Widow movie at this point. Any others that we missed?
Eternals was supposed to
Yes,
be last fall as well.
that's right. Swole Kumail, which is what everybody wanted. So, um, so going into this, maybe let's start with a little bit of like setting the stage and just kind of giving our own perspectives because uh, WandaVision was something that seemed really interesting because it felt like Marvel's gonna get weird here, right? We know that Vision was a character that actually died at the end of Endgame, was
Yeah,
not brought back, or
one of
sorry,
the
Infinity
few.
War. Yeah, it was not brought back in Endgame, and it seemed like to have this person all of a sudden, or this character all of a sudden coming back, there's obviously going to be something like psychedelic or trippy or surreal happening. So that was really promising. And then we start to get some of the promos, and it seems like they're going for like a real wonky sitcom type vibe. Like I don't know. You think about the Brady Bunch or
Yeah,
something like that as like
Dick
the
Van Dyke Show. There's a lot of clear homages through these first two episodes. Both the title
yeah.
sequences and even the
I
beats
Love Lucy.
when
Yep.
the stuff. Yeah.
Yep. So it seemed just really intriguing to see. After getting these first two episodes, I mean, I guess where were you to begin with, and where is it leaving you now?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely happy it's first. I think if COVID hadn't happened, Falcon and the Winter Soldier would have been the first
Mhm.
Disney Plus MCU show we got. But by all accounts, that feels like something more familiar as an extension of the Captain America films. I feel like we got a handle on that. This,
Mhm.
as you said, yeah, different flavor at the very least. And like, Vision coming back to life. Obviously, they'll explain it in some way eventually. I really don't give a shit what the reason is because I am happy to see them back because both Vision and Scarlet Witch, two of the most underserved MCU characters to this point, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, talented performers, uh, didn't really have a whole lot to do
Right.
throughout most of these films. Big part of that would be that they don't have any solo films to be in. So I'm happy that they're getting this chance. And I mean, if Elizabeth Olsen's going to be wallowing away on some eight picture project, you might as well let her do something cool once in a while, right? So,
Totally.
and by all accounts, this will be tying into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness in some way. Because again, the Wanda's powers are still nebulous on the MCU, but we know how powerful she is in terms of altering reality and stuff. So that all makes sense to me. Um, but yeah, I'm just the love and attention it was giving and showing to 1950s sitcoms uh,
Yeah.
really stood out to me. I thought it was cool just because it was different. Um, the critics also got the third episode on their
Mhm.
screeners, and apparently we get more into what the plot of this 9 episode season will be in that. But I don't care if it's like kind of light on story. I just like that it's a different flair because as we all know, the MCU is often quite homogenous. So anything that kind of breaks the wheel a little bit is cool with me.
Yeah, definitely. And even speaking about like the care that they put into it, they even like shot the first two in like the old 4:3
Yeah.
aspect ratio of like the old sitcoms, which is pretty neat. And I think I totally agree with your point. It's a good one that these are two characters that were totally underserved. And to be honest, like Vision just never was one that stood out to me. It's kind of hard, I think, to connect with this like robot who is like learning how to love. In a lot of ways, we would be mocking this if it was Westworld in a sense. It just
Good
wasn't
point.
like played up as like the central theme of these movies. But I kind of like that they put them in this world where Vision has to not be Vision the
Hmm.
most time, so you get to see actual Paul Bettany just
Yeah.
being handsome and charming, which is cool.
They'll make him sit in the makeup chair every time. That's
Right.
nice of them.
Yeah, and they're making it kitschy enough and goofy enough where you're kind of just like going along with like the stupidness of the plots. Um, while also I think tying in a couple of things where you're like, what's the bigger thing at play? Like you have like the guy in the beekeeper outfit at the end of the second episode, or how they kind of rewind and Wanda hears someone saying, "Wanda, who's doing this to you?" In a voice. So there's enough things here to keep it like interesting and intriguing. And going back to the idea of like the weirdness, I mean, you think about like even the phase three and like the second half of it when we finally get a Doctor Strange movie, right? And I guess maybe that's at the beginning of phase three. Now I'm thinking about it, but people really,
2016, whatever the fuck it was.
yeah. So people really, I think, liked that Doctor Strange was had all these weird visuals and this trippiness and
Oh yeah,
this and like
I'm a big fan of that one.
yeah, and you think about even Infinity War, like one of the best scenes is when they're trying to get Thanos' glove off, and Strange does all of his weird like
Yeah.
chakra shit. It's just really cool visuals. So the more that they're just like leaning into this like uniqueness and weirdness, especially as the superheroes are becoming a little bit more niche and not as well known in this upcoming phase, I think that's just going to allow them to keep trying things and uh, really making these homages to these TV genres. So, or
Right.
in these movie genres as well. So I'm all for it. I'm really excited to see the third episode, see where this goes. Um, and anything about the episodes that really stood out, like any scenes or moments for you?
No, I mean, I appreciate like the laugh track humor they had going
Hmm.
on again because it's familiar like the old school sitcoms. I like Catherine Hahn's presence early on as the nosy neighbor.
Yeah.
For MCU people, apparently, adult Monica Rambeau from Captain Marvel will be popping up. Again, I don't really care about the MCU tissue, it's connective tissue so much. And like that was one thing when I saw the trailer. Like, there's a moment in the trailer where like they're being chased by like soldiers or like tanks or something. I'm like, oh wow, that just looks quite generic. I don't need this.
Hmm.
Let's keep it in their minds. Let's keep it going weird. So I think inevitably we're gonna start to see the seams crack. It'll eventually go all full color. But like a lot of MCU stuff, there seems to be a lot of attention given to the
Hmm.
choices. So should be still pleasant. So curious.
Yeah, I'm with you. And any theories on like what's going on?
No, no
No.
theory at all. I don't know. Maybe it's like some Truman Show shit. I guess I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah, my initial theory was this was like us experiencing Wanda having like a psychotic break due to like the
Yeah.
grief of Vision's death, but hearing who's doing this to you, obviously it seems like there might be like a villain that we
Right.
come to see at play. I did think the voice that was saying like who's doing this to you sounded a bit like Chris Evans. So I'm wondering if, especially because he's rumored to be signing on to play Captain America again, some things maybe he'll be tied in some way, but that might have just been hopefulness on my part. So,
Yeah.
a lot to come. We'll be talking about it as it wraps up, but drop us your thoughts in the comments below. Any last thoughts on this before we jump to some movies?
Uh, I think some people may still not know this, but Marvel obviously has made TV shows before, but that was under the old system where Marvel Television was separate from Marvel Studios. Now Marvel Television is no more, and the TV is also made by Marvel Studios and under the purview of Kevin Feige. So, and obviously we know about a myriad MCU shows forthcoming as outlined by the Disney Investor Day. So cool to see them continue their takeover, I suppose. So we'll see how the product turns out in
Definitely.
7 more weeks.
Uh, Marvel is a can't miss right now, so they keep the run going. And we also are going to be talking about some can't miss movies, I think. And News of the World is the first one we're going to jump into. The Tom Hanks movie, I guess I'm just going to say it's a Paul Greengrass directed film, but I mean this is really Tom Hanks showing out. I think making another run at a potential Oscar here, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But basically. Um, Tom Hanks plays this retired captain from the Confederate infantry, which is an
Hmm.
interesting piece of this, who now is just traveling around from town to town, reading newspapers from around the country, people telling stories, making money off this. Um, it's I think in some ways I found this to be a super uh, I don't want to even say like fun because I didn't find much fun about it, but it felt kind of like it went from like high point to high point to high point, where
Mhm.
there's this like father daughter relationship at the middle of this. Tom Hanks comes across Joanna, the
Yeah.
character's given name, but Cicada is the name given to her by the Native Americans who take her in. This orphan girl who's Native American tribe, and prior to that, her parents were killed, and he's kind of tasked with reuniting her with her aunt and uncle, who will take her in. So um, there's this journey where there's all these adventures, but in this really sweet relationship at the middle of it. Um, I guess just to maybe start setting the conversation, did you enjoy the movie? Did you find this to be a movie you would go back to?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a little straightforward, but it's an on the road western. It's a familiar, you know, genre trapping. We understand what this is, and when it's done well, it's quite enjoyable, especially when you have someone like Tom Hanks in the lead. So yeah, no, I liked it a lot. I thought it was quite good. I mean, going in, I think a lot of people know this movie was held for the end of the year. Vying for Oscars, and I think as a movie, like maybe it sneaks in the best picture. It's in like the greater mix anyway, but like clearly, like that was really just reserved for like the Tom Hanks performance, but it's really Hanks just doing old Hanks again. It's not that different from like Captain Phillips Hanks or Sully
Yep.
Hanks. Captain Phillips also Paul Greengrass.
Hmm.
So, but it's just I think it's just well made
Yeah.
on the road western. So it's enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece that probably stuck with me the most is just it's really solid overall. Whether it's the cinematography, you have these really sweeping landscapes of, I think they're supposed to be in Texas or
Yeah,
traveling through the
it's
South.
Texas
Uh,
post war, so like late 1860s.
Um, so you have these really beautiful, just like sweeping shots of rolling hills and mountains,
Hmm.
valleys, deserts. I think it's the action scenes. Something with Paul Greengrass, you kind of expect the action
Yeah,
scenes to be really
shaky
well done,
cam.
right? You known or probably best known for the Bourne movie. So if
Yes.
he's not making quality action scenes, there's something wrong. Um, but then also, I think like the way that the relationship between Cicada and the captain grows makes a lot of sense, and I think he hits all those emotional points. Maybe not to the degree that um, some dramatic movies do. Like I didn't find myself like tearing up or really being choked up by this,
No.
but um, I definitely was rooting for Hanks to come around and take the kid on, and um, I overall just incredibly solid. But I don't think this is a film that I'm going to look back on for this year and be like, News of the World is one you have to see, if that makes sense. I don't know if there's anything that it was like superb or exceptional about the movie. Did you feel like there's anything like that?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, because like dramatically, that's probably where it's like slightly weaker. I mean, and like I just have some quibbles about that stuff. I think early on, when he encounters the kid, it's like, oh, well, look at that, Tom Hanks burying the lynched black man. He might have fought for the Confederates, but he's a good dude. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, miss me with that shit, please. And surprisingly, there's very little mention of black people the rest of the way. Unsurprisingly, I should say. It's like, anyway, um,
But they talk about Mexicans quite a bit.
right. And like,
Um,
There's also like not a huge Native American character presence. I was more
no.
surprised. I would have liked them to actually interact more. They're just kind of on the periphery. And I think, and then like that scene in the rain early on when like they're across like the gorge and you see them just kind of traveling.
Hmm.
Like, oh wow, that's kind of like a haunting scene as you realize the girl is she is by all intents and purposes a Native American. That is what she knows. That is the culture she is a part of, and like that's pretty heartbreaking. But I
Yep.
would have liked to see more of that Native American culture. I kind of contrast this movie with Hostels, which came out a few years
Mm,
back when Christian Bale, just because that's a movie where you have Wes Studi and Adam Beach, two like the goat Native American actors, actually like being big parts of the film.
yep.
In this, the natives are just kind of on the side, even though Johanna, Cicada, is literally speaking Kiowa, right? Like she doesn't even know English. I thought that was a weird choice. Maybe that's from the book. I don't know. I did find a big part of it pressing though. Prescient though. Like if you think about the beats of the film, we after that like mountain chase and shootout, the next like set piece would be when they get encountered when they go to that new county and they kind of get like Hanks gets forced to like read the propaganda news by like the businessman who kind of runs that like
Yep.
outpost town. And I'm like, oh, the
It's a little on the nose.
yeah, it's a
For
little on the
sure.
nose about the character and the self adulation and
Literally being screamed at as the media to read the fake news
yeah.
was quite just like shoving it down our throats.
Yeah, and I was like, again, I don't know how much that's from the book, but either way, it's like, okay, well, we know exactly what that's supposed to mean. Um,
And
and like,
especially because then the story that he reads that whips everybody up is about people like fighting back against like
yeah,
the man. So I was just like, boy, this is ham
right,
fisted.
yeah, and like the way that resolves too, you have it was John Callie, who's like, I guess he was just kind of wrapped up in Tom's Hank's storytelling, Kyle Kidd's storytelling, so he kills the other dude and makes his way on with his life, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from that, to be
Yeah.
honest. But we kept it moving, and it was well done. But I like that scene. Like I initially, I was like, I had like way more dread. I thought this was gonna be like these like this is like some bandit people, and like you
Yeah.
see it on the side, like oh, like they're kind of like slaughtering buffalo, and they seem to have a certain uh, particular way about how they're operating on the West. They mentioned how they pushed out the Mexicans and the natives,
Mhm.
right? And yet it still kind of like lacked the punch I expected.
Yep.
Like this movie never gets nearly as dark as I thought it would, given again it's pretty grim times.
Well, and as I was kind of thinking about why this movie didn't hit for me more, and you kind of touched on this at the beginning. This character is a very like Tom Hanksy character, and he really kind of plays, I feel like, similar roles a lot of the time. And I'm almost wondering if, like, for me, I just have a little bit of like that Tom Hanks fatigue. Like, I guess the only movie I can think of recently where he didn't play like, a even if not like a complicated man, just like a straight up good person or a complicated man who's turned good in some way,
Sure.
is The Circle, where he's like a
Right.
villain, and in that movie it was a total flop, and his
That movie sucks.
performances wasn't didn't work. So it's like maybe the Tom Hanks of it all is just where uh you know it doesn't hit the same way it did back in the 90s, so to speak.
Yeah, well, again, yeah, I think you're right. It's really
94.
just the choices because apart from A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, where at least like the Fred Rogers impersonation requires you to do little different things,
Hmm.
but like News of the World, Greyhound from last year, The Post,
Hmm.
Sully, Captain Phillips, like Bridge of Spies, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
And again, it's not the biggest deal because Tom Hanks is old. Tom Hanks
Hmm.
is certified after the 90s. It doesn't
Oh,
really matter.
totally.
So he's just doing what he wants. And I guess what he wants is to do the same thing in different ways, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I
It's all
mean,
right. The
I
rest of the
think
movie's
he
well made enough that I don't mind that much.
I think he's comfortable. He's established as like a brand, so to speak, and I think he just wants to keep in that lane. So good
Yeah.
for him, but I think that does in some way kind of cap the movies he's in a sense. But any last thoughts on this before we jump into maybe a movie I'm a little more excited to talk about?
Like the movie we're about to discuss, News of the World as a universal release got to us on VOD 17 days after theatrical release. That would have been Christmas Day for that. And the Universal is the only distributor to be doing this kind of hybrid model at this time. Keep an eye on that, see how this continues. I know, I mean, thinking about it, don't you think News of the World would have been better served with a day and date VOD release around the holidays when more people were around? Like, this definitely feels like a dad movie. Like, I know my dad wants to see this movie.
Hmm.
Like, I wonder if they missed their moment by waiting to the kind of nondescript time of Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, which I think in COVID doesn't feel like any other weekend, right? So, like, I don't know how many people put this on their calendar because I think the average person doesn't know that you can rent this 17 days later, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's a good point. That I think if they had even done it that between that week, or like like dropping it right before the new year or something like that, they would have gotten a lot more buzz than now. It just felt like it just kind of dropped and came and went in a sense. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But another movie that also dropped is A Promising Young Woman from Emerald Fennell, who's probably best known for show running Killing Eve season 2,
Correct.
which we talked about, and you can go check out our review on that,
Yeah.
youtube.com/
Not the
nostalgia
biggest
pod.
fans.
Yeah. um yeah, it's a tough act to follow, and I would say season 2 is better than season 3, so
That's true.
there's
Give
that.
give you that. And I
um
think Emerald Fennell in general, if you look at her CV, she's also an actor as well. Seems to be pretty talented person who's tried a lot of different things and directing. It's just a piece of that.
Totally. And I think similarly to Killing Eve, where you're really focused on, I guess, two women in that, this is a movie that's totally focused on one person, and the movie is carried by the performance of Carrie Mulligan, I'd say. Who, I think had a bit of like a slow rise, but once she actually like I think caught fire, is now just like totally in fuego. We talked about Mudbound, Wildlife,
Hmm.
which she was great in. I mean, Great Gatsby is probably where people first saw her, in popular. But
Don't forget the short UK Netflix series Collateral.
yes, definitely. Um, I mean, she's just been really, really good in a lot of things in the past
Yeah.
decade, and a rising star. How did you? I mean, first, how did you feel about the movie? But then, mostly, how did you feel about Mulligan's performance in A
Yeah,
Promising
I
Young
really
Woman?
liked the movie a lot. Going into this movie, which played back at Sundance 2020, was supposed to come out in the theaters April 2020. Knowing the subject matter, I remember seeing this trailer in the theater
Yeah,
over a year ago. I remember seeing it, be like, "Oh, that looks cool. That looks like it's definitely trying stuff." I appreciate
mhm,
this. Happy to see it. Um, it was not. I don't think it's nearly as like polarizing as I was led on to believe. Like it has a lot of style and um, is well made, and I think this is actually being echoed by other people. I find this movie quite agreeable. Like I think a lot of people are
mhm.
are finding that out too. But Carrie Mulligan, yeah, she's excellent in this. After Frances McDormand, Viola Davis, and probably Vanessa Kirby as well, it feels like Carrie Mulligan's pretty safe for Best Actress at the Oscars this year,
Definitely.
and I think it's
Yes.
well earned. She carries this movie.
Yeah, and from what I remember about the polarization of it, it's I guess maybe just to give people a quick synopsis, it's basically this woman who seems to be depressed, seems to not really be like making much of her life after having potentially a medical career ahead of her, and you kind of see her going about these I don't know, catfishing excursions where she'll go to a
Yeah,
club, fake drunk, have some dirtbag bring her home, and then when they're about to sexually assault her, she'll like turn the tables on them and make them feel really uncomfortable. And I think that was the thing that people found to be potentially controversial. This catfishing and
yeah,
uh,
ethics and all that stuff.
yeah, of the interaction. Whereas really the furthest she takes it in any of these cases is like scaring someone that their daughter might have been sexually assaulted, even though they really didn't have
Yes,
anyone
right.
do that. But I think more so, she's doing these things as a way to get revenge for something that happened to her friend, where her friend was publicly sexually assaulted, and then the friend subsequently killed herself as a result of
Yeah,
psychological effects from that assault. So um, yeah, I didn't find the movie to be controversial at all to me. I actually thought it was pretty thoughtful and thought provoking in a lot of ways. And again, like you said, Mulligan is just incredible in this. She's really, I think, towing this line between being this obviously depressed and like working through something character, who then at the same time is able to go and be super intimidating and like kind of terrifying at times, in terms of how she like just like will flip the tables and like push these guys to like really examine themselves and how terrible they are. It's just really
yeah,
impressive.
sure. Yeah, for me, I think like plot wise, it was actually more straightforward than I expected, but I really
Mm,
didn't mind because I think like the overall presence and all the acting. Like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop with Bo Burnham's character. I
Right.
was kind of expecting the very ending with like the, letter shows up in the mail and like the text messages go out. Like I was expecting that kind of stuff to happen because I just didn't see this movie going to like the truly dark place.
Hmm.
It might have been hinting at when what happens to uh, Mulligan's character happens, and maybe that's a choice that if had been done, the movie makes it actually even stronger. If it actually ended on an even darker note than it does, and like it's a black comedy because this is still really heavy stuff and quite depressing.
Hmm.
But I appreciated how kind of how rhythmic it was again, even if the plot was a little straightforward. Um,
Yeah.
and like I think like the supporting cast, a lot of like small guest roles, all like really well done. Like I thought Christopher Mintz-Plasse is one of the dirtbag guys.
Hmm.
Excellent choice. Sam Richardson, same way.
Yeah.
Sam Richardson probably had my favorite line for meta reasons. When he's like, "You're not even that hot." Shades of Normal People with Daisy Edgar Jones, where it's like how anyone would ever say Carrie Mulligan
Is not that
isn't that
hot.
hot, especially when dressed the way she was in that scene. I'm like, God, that is pure fantasy. Like that's the most unbelievable part about the movie to me.
Yeah. Well, it's unbelievable unless you know like dirtbags like that. And I
Yeah,
do
of
have to
course.
say, like the casting for like the douchebag guys was just like chef's kiss, in a lot of ways. Like Adam Brody,
Hmm.
who famously played Seth on the OC, is who's kind of like the nice guy to like Ryan's like bad boy, but Seth,
Yeah,
I think, is a character that probably had some problems and wasn't kind of seen
Max
at that
Greenfield
time.
from New Girl,
Yep, Chris Lowell from
Glow.
Glow.
Yep.
Just great. And then it's also kind of interesting to have Connie Britton, right, playing this like dean of students at the college who uh, overlooked this character, this friend's sexual assault, didn't even remember the name of the girl, and
Right.
how disgusting it is. Whereas Connie Britton on Friday Night Lights plays Tammy Taylor, who's like the perfect like mom, and everybody wishes they had a mom who was like that engaged, that loving but firm, and like it's just kind of funny to like flip these people who we know from all these places and kind of putting them in these roles where you're like, oh, now they're just playing complete assholes. um Allison Brie also kind of was in that in between, although we've seen Allison Brie, I think, in more complex roles than just being like a good person, so to speak. So um
Right.
any scenes or moments that totally stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, I think like early on when you're seeing like what the Notebook means and like Mulligan's like scheme, Cassie's
Hmm.
scheme about like what she's doing. Like that's all like really fun and stuff. But I think one of the most important scenes is when she encounters Alfred Molina's lawyer character
Hmm.
and who someone who's like covering up and fighting against people that made these accusations and basically defending men accused of
Yep.
sexual assault. And he actually expresses like real remorse basically from the jump, yet Cassie doesn't feel any better upon encountering that, right? Like everything to that point she's almost like getting off of, at least temporarily, on exposing people and perhaps at least temporarily shaming them or maybe changing their behavior. But when she encounters that lawyer who knows how fucked up his history was, you know, different than how the dean was acting, and like it doesn't give her any solace at all. And I think
Hmm.
that's where the movie kind of turns, and you realize that like she is just kind of on this dark path. So
Hmm.
I think that was important for the movie to like kind of progress.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's I think it's just a really well made movie. I think it's funny, looking through like the producer list. Margot Robbie is like the high profile name on there, and I got like some Birds of Prey vibes at times from this. Not necessarily
Hmm,
like the goofiness, but I think like the
sure.
color palette. Especially when she like dresses up as like the nurse who goes to like be the dancer for like the bachelor party when she gets murdered.
Yeah.
Um, that had very strong like Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn type vibes to me. So I think it's playing on a lot of uh, at least exposing a lot of complex issues in really interesting ways. And I think definitely a movie that I would say we haven't seen a lot of movies I would compare to it. So
No.
that's always interesting.
If anything, you should compare it to I May Destroy You. on HBO, which
Yeah,
in
good one.
non-COVID times they would have been released much closer together. But
Mhm.
I was trying to look for some more negativity about the movie. I was on Letterboxd and I saw some comments about how it's kind of like post Me Too commodification of Me Too by like left wing people and just espousing these ideals and stuff. But I feel like because Promising Young Woman still kind of goes about in a dark way and it's still quite psychological,
Mhm.
I didn't really find it like in that exploitative way. I think I May Destroy You, by the nature of being TV show, by nature of like Michaela Cole's like enrapturing creation and existence within that show. On a higher level. As a result, it was our best show of the year,
Mhm.
after all, in 2020. But for a movie like limited runtime, I think this still gets at a lot of stuff. And as far as movies concerned, like you said, there's not really much that's attempted to do anything like this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I guess one quick observation, and then I want to just ask where we're at with the award stuff for this. Bo Burnham, 6'5", dude's huge.
I did that
Um,
Google too. I was like, is he taller than me?
well,
Shit.
and it's funny because especially in the scene where like they're all in the coffee shop, it's Carrie Mulligan, Bo Burnham, and Laverne Cox, and Laverne Cox I think is like uh, like 6 footer, or maybe a little taller too.
Hmm.
Uh, I was like, is Carrie Mulligan just super short? Like I just wasn't sure, but she's 5'7". Like she's
Yeah.
very average size for a woman, and I think tall for an actress. So
Sure.
it's interesting to see that. But awards for this, I mean, I think we both agree Mulligan will probably be on the
Yeah.
short list for an best actress nom. Movie? Do you think the movie could garner some uh, buzz for a best picture nom?
I think so. It's by no means a lock because it's definitely not a greater mix. Like there's movies like this and Soul and News of the World and some late coming movies we haven't seen yet, like Jews and the Black Messiah. Like it feels like there's a lot of movies that we're kind of pegging for those last few spots,
Yep.
and this is definitely one of those. So way too early to say for sure. I also think original screenplay is probably
Yeah,
this movie's future. That would be, I think, quite just.
I agree with those. I don't think Fennel will get a director nom, but I think just getting that screenplay could be big for her as well.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned Judas and the Black Messiah, which we will be reviewing a bit earlier than it will be dropping. I went back and watched the trailer this weekend just because I'm super hyped for that. Can't
Oh
wait to
yeah.
see that. Any last thoughts before we wrap up for the day, Dave?
I hope people find this movie again.
Yeah.
Like News of the World, I just don't know if this is a drop that has been eventized properly by Universal,
Mhm.
by nature of it just being a POV thing. Then again, given that the Oscars are still 3 months away, damn near every Oscar contender is available at this point, with like
Mhm.
3 or 4 exceptions. So maybe people will just kind of seek this out in the months to come. I guess there's no rush. So
I
hopefully,
hope
hopefully
so.
with some more nominations for the movie and like Mulligan, that'll let lead more people to seeing this. I certainly hope so.
Me too. What should the people be watching or consuming for next week?
So we got a few things for next week. We got the other Euphoria one-off special on HBO. This one around Hunter Schafer's Jules character. We'll be talking about one of the new 2021 TV hits of the year, Lupin, French Netflix show with Omar Sy. And there's also a notable film finally getting to VOD. That would be The Climb from Sony Pictures Classic, a movie that was acclaimed back at Cannes 2019 and then was in the theaters this fall, but it's finally on the internet for most people to finally see. So happy to talk about that one.
If you want to follow along with us next week, hit that subscribe on soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod or youtube.com/nostalgiapod. And give us that follow on Twitter as well at nostalgiapod. And we'll see you next week.